I want to talk about some young players that I think we need to start seeing after the bye week.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in, being a part of the community, being part of the show, being part of the fabric of being a Badger fan with us. I appreciate it. Thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, you can place a $5 bet, get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about why I think Gard has the right lineup in place, why I think some of the issues defensively are more talent versus scheme, and obviously get into some of the changes we want to see after the bye week. I want to start there. There's two parts I want to go with this. You're coming off that Iowa game where I've had so many Badger fans reach out to me and just say that's one of the hardest to watch Badger games I've seen in a long time. And then you're heading into a bye week. What a good time for a bye week. A good time to reset, try to figure a few things out. You have Oregon looming. That's terrifying. That's like seeing a battleship coming over the horizon, right? And your coastal defenses are not prepared. They're a wagon. But there's still some things I think we need to address and acknowledge. The first one is, and this isn't a bye week thing for me, and I don't even know how to say this. I think there's got to be some coaching changes on this staff. And it doesn't mean people that were brought in are bad coaches. Sometimes things just aren't a fit. Sometimes you buy the perfect Lego piece, but it just doesn't fit in your castle anywhere. There's no brick to put it on. And you look at this offense, and it's just not working. And I am not in the locker room. I'm not in the meeting rooms. But it's not working. I just wonder if Phil Longo, what he's trying to do here just doesn't work, whether that's working completely with Luke Fickell, whether it's maybe the inability for him to find the right quarterback to find the pieces. Maybe it's an inability to get all the pieces he needs to run his offense. There needs to be something simpler, something with a little more less of a learning curve probably as you're bringing in transfer portal players, and something that quite frankly allows you to maintain your identity as a physical smash mouth team. And it hasn't worked through 2 years with with Phil Longo. And again, I don't think this is anything you do in the bye week, but I think that's a conversation that has to be had. And I'm just not sure. It just might not be a good fit. And it does not mean Longo's a bad coach. Like you remember the conversations we had when Phil Longo was hired, people thought it was a great move. A lot of people thought it was a great move. He's put a lot of people into the NFL. He's had prolific offenses. And that's not everybody. I know there were some Badger fans. JB was one of them. I'll point that out. I'm always about giving people flowers when they're right. He questioned the move. I liked it. I thought he would bring in a certain pedigree quarterback. I thought he would upgrade our offense, make it a little more modern, but still he wants to run the ball. It just hasn't happened. You look at some numbers. Last year, Wisconsin averaged 25 points per game, or 23 points per game. This year, it's 25. But really, to me, it's how does the offense look when you're challenged? How does the offense look when you're playing the better teams? Wisconsin is 14th in the conference in scoring against winning teams, 13.5 points per game against winning teams. Like you can't win ball games if you can't score against better teams. And I just think it might, again, this is not anything. Sometimes things just don't work with really good coaches. And I think we might be kind of at that point to some degree with Phil Longo. And it doesn't make me happy. I'm not a type of guy who would ever, I just think it might not be working, right? You look at the passing offense again, which that is more of what Phil Longo was brought in to do. Phil Longo wasn't brought in to upgrade the rushing offense. That's never been an issue at Wisconsin. He was brought in to modernize the passing game, to bring Wisconsin's elements in that aspect of scheme into the 21st century, into modern football. They're 16th in the Big Ten right now in completion percentage, 14th in yards, 13th in picks. And a lot of teams have lost quarterbacks or receivers. Like, you can't keep just blaming injuries for it. It just hasn't worked. And, you look at the quarterbacks he's brought in. Maybe Mentor is a freshman. Like, there should be no pressure on him to perform. I still love the physical skill set of Maybe Mentor. I think I am not down on him at all, but he's a freshman. But you brought Nick Evers in, didn't work out, transferred. You brought in Tanner Mordecai, who wasn't great last year, super tough, gritty player. Didn't really work out great. TVD through early returns to the first 2 games, it didn't look like he was delivering on the deep ball we've had. Braden Locke has struggled. Cole LaCrue hasn't been able to gain traction for whatever reason. I know injuries have played a part there. My bigger point is You've brought him in to modernize the offense, to upgrade the passing game, and those things they've taken. They haven't even, not have they not gone forward. They've taken a step back since Phil Longo's gotten here. They've gotten worse. I just don't know if it's working, man. And I think that's not a bye week conversation. I think it's an off-season conversation to see if maybe something, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe there's adjustments still be had. I do think, unfortunately, Longo has seen his starting quarterback go down both years. Like, that's absolutely a factor. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the best fit, and I'm curious to see what happens in the offseason there. A few other things I would like to see coming out of the bye week. I mentioned young players. College football is unique. I know a lot of fans when you start to struggle, start calling for every young player, every freshman, start the backup quarterback. That's not always the best strategy, right? Like, I don't think you should be starting Mabry Meadtour against Oregon at home. You keep Braden Locke in there for this one, right? And Braden Locke has shown some flashes here and there. I've said it before. I don't think he's physically good enough at times, but I don't think you throw Mabry Meadtour in there. However, there are some guys that I would like to see get a little more rep coming out of the bye week. There's no secret. You saw what Brendan Sullivan did to the edges of this Wisconsin Badgers defense. Our outside linebackers struggled with contain, struggled with pass rush, where he haven't been as disruptive there. I would like to see Thomas Heiberger get some reps. 6'4", big athlete, assuming he's fully healthy, like he was dealing with an injury earlier in the year. But the plan has always been to get him reps. I think he's healthy now. Again, if he's not, then don't play him 100%. I'm not about trying to aggravate an injury. But I would like to see if he can give this defense a little more juice, because he's a really unique athlete. And I think even if he's out there making freshman mistakes, he's also going to be out there running 20 miles an hour. I don't know if he's actually running 20, but he's also going to be out there being a physical upgrade from some of what I think we've seen at times. He's a big wingspan. And I think if you put him on the edge with a Brendan Sullivan, I kind of like our chances a little bit better there. Anelu Lafayette is another guy. Some third down situations, I wouldn't hate to see him in there. He's a guy that I thought in practice looked pretty good, had a lot of kind of disruptive plays, has a little bit of Herbig in him, 4-star kid, good burst off the edge. Like, I want to start seeing some of our more athletic, younger edge players start to get a few reps here and there, to build for next year, but also because we've just been lacking in disruptive plays all year. And it just is what it is. We haven't been getting to the quarterback. We haven't been forcing turnovers. Turnovers have an element of luck. Turnovers also have an element of being disruptive defensively. Like, you're more prone to luck when you're getting in the quarterback's face, right? You're more prone to being lucky when you're tipping balls, when you're hitting people hard. You hit people hard with athletes that are bigger, faster, stronger, that are getting home. And I would like to see some more edge guys just start to get some reps, start to work and start to build. It's not about building for next year, because, like, you don't get a draft pick in college football, right? Like, you have to, every game matters. Don't punt on games. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying put every freshman in there, because what does it matter? No, it absolutely matters. Beating Minnesota absolutely friggin' matters this year. Beating Nebraska absolutely matters this year. But I think you can still pursue that overall objective with getting some of these young guys reps, so that next year, when you're replacing a lot of pieces on this team, and you are going to be replacing a lot of these pieces, there's a lot of veteran linebackers that are going to be moving on. It would be helpful to have Thomas Heiberger have some reps under his belt. And quite frankly, I don't think it could be that much worse if the wheels aren't going to completely fall off if he gets 5 to 10 reps. And same with Anelu Lafayette. In my opinion, I would like to see Ernest Willer on the line a little bit more. It's those type of pieces. Brandon Lane, I'd like to see a little bit more of. On the inside, Christian Allegro had 16 tackles against Iowa. Physical. He just needs a starter share reps at this point. So those are some of the defenders I'd like to see more offensively. I'd like to see some Grant Steck reps. Maybe a little Dylan Jones. Certainly Quincy Burrows, kind of a big, fast, athletic, could potentially be that boundary receiver. I'd like to see him get some more reps. So those are some pieces. I would like to see some of those young guys start to shift into smaller roles coming up the bye week, so we can start to season them for next year, and do that in a way where you're absolutely not punting on these last games. But I think you got to start mixing in some of the young guys with juice. I just think you have to at this point. All right, we're going to take a second here, get our word from our friends of the show. Coming up next, talk a little bit about defensively. There's a conversation. Is it talent or scheme that kind of tripped us up against Iowa and has hurt us at times this year? I want to talk a little bit about that next. Locked On Badgers, but first, a very quick break for our friends of the show over at Hims. And I've talked about this before, man. You never know when the moment hits, right? Like, you could just be sitting there chilling, eating popcorn, minding your business, watching the phone, and then Kenzel Doe houses a punt return, and the moment hits, and you want to be ready. Right now, Hims is changing men's healthcare, providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. So you save money and you still be in those moments. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims helps you find the ED option that works best for you. No insurance is needed. One low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Today's episode also brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. Talked about FanDuel a lot. Not going to beat it, right? FanDuel is incredible right now. $5 bonus bet gets you $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. What a great place to do it, right? Obviously, you have NFL, NBA, college basketball, college football, all the sports are here. Tons of opportunities over at FanDuel.com to parlay action. I know a lot of people were on the Badgers covering last night, which they ended up doing because the line dropped in that Holy Cross game. Depending on where you got the line, they covered. You could have done all of it over at FanDuel. Futures, parlays, teasers, spreads. Again, I bet with my heart. I wasn't on the Badgers last night, but I will probably be. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to make several more bets on Wisconsin this year because that's how I roll. I'm going to do those over at FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. So let's talk talent versus scheme, because I see this conversation a lot. And first of all, I want to address kind of the obvious. It's always both, right? Like it feels like at times in society where we're at, we're always trying to, it's all this or it's all that. No, it's always a combination of things, especially in a sport as complicated as football. Like, so when you give up 42 to Iowa, there's scheme elements, there's talent elements, but I really do think, because people say, well, Jim Leonard never would have given up 42 to Iowa, and Dave Aranda never would have given up 42 to Iowa, and Justin Wilcox, and they probably wouldn't have, but they probably wouldn't have because they had a lot more talent in their front seven, and that comes off harsh, and that's not a knock to anybody on a roster. We got a lot of young pieces, transfers still mixing in, but if the draft was held tomorrow, and I've said this before, if the draft was held tomorrow, would there be a defensive lineman or linebacker from this roster picked? I don't know if there would be. Now, I think in a year, 2 years, Christian Allegro could absolutely see his name called. Tackett Curtis, Sebastian Cheeks. Like, there's young Thomas Heiberger, Anelu Lafayette. There are young athletic guys that if you tell me in 3 years, those guys are hearing their names called, sure. None of that would surprise me. I like a lot of the pieces on this team. Maybe Jaheim Thomas, who's playing better, could be an NFL guy. Maybe Elijah Hills, who's shown some burst, but I don't know if he's stout enough against the run. But my point is this. I don't know if there's a guy that would get drafted in our front seven if the draft was tomorrow. That's crazy for people to then say, well, it's just all scheme. There's a massive talent component to this. If you went back, and I went back and looked at every defense that Dave Aranda, Jim Leonard, and Justin Wilcox had. Dave Aranda had, on average, in his couple years here, 3.6 defensive guys in his front seven, right? So every year he had 3 to 4 defensive guys that would get drafted in the league playing in his regular rotation in the front seven. That's a lot of talent. Of course, his defenses were better. And again, this is where I go back to, it's not one thing. Also, Dave Aranda was a really elite defensive coordinator, but he also had NFL talent. You look at Jim Leonard. Jim Leonard's incredible. I will never say a bad word about Jim Leonard. From the playing career as the DB, the punt returner, the NFL career coming on as a secondary coach, safeties coach, defensive coordinator, I'll never say a bad word about him. He was incredible as a defensive coordinator, period. There's no but this or, well, but also this. No, he was incredible as a defensive coordinator. He also had NFL talent. A lot of it, right? You look back at some of those teams, 2019, and I wrote all these guys down and I kind of averaged it out. Like 2019, he had Sanborn, Orr, Bond, Loudermilk, Henningsen, Leo, Keanu Benton. He had 7 guys who all played at least 11 games that year. And Chanel didn't play a ton that year, but then even if you took them off, he had 6 guys who would all be drafted in the front seven. That's just the front seven. Of course, those defenses wouldn't have given up 42 because they had NFL guys at both levels everywhere, plus stars. He didn't just have guys get drafted. Like, Bond was one of the best pass rushers in the country. Like, he had stars in the front seven. And there's not a guy like that now. Now, none of this is to take away from the fact that I thought Tressel needed to make better adjustments against Iowa. I thought there was no adjustments at times. I didn't understand it. I'm sure if I went into the coaching room and we watched all 22 of the coaches, they would point out a lot of things. There's a lot of nuance fans miss. I miss. There still comes to a point where if you're Tressel, you got to just put 4 defensive linemen in the game and put both your safeties 8 yards off the line of scrimmage and say, we dare you to beat us throwing the ball 100%. But there's still a point where it's not going to matter a ton until you upgrade the talent in the front seven on this team. Does it sound like I'm saying, kind of talking about both sides of this? Yes, because both sides have to get better. The coaching has to get better, but the talent has to get better. My bigger point is I think it's more talent. I think if you were to replace Tressel with a different defensive coordinator, which I'm not advocating for, but if you were, how much better does the defense get if you don't improve the talent level? Like if you brought Jim Leonard in right now, is the defense dramatically better without one NFL guy in the front seven? I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is. However, if you kept Tressel and then just dramatically upgraded the talent in the front seven, is the defense a lot better? Yeah, it is, because talent matters in college football. It just does. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding like kind of just, this is just what I've been stewing on. They have to get better in the front seven. They have to be more talented there. And some of that's just going to come from maturation of young guys. You could easily look at this defense in a couple of years and see a defense with, Dylan Johnson is now a sophomore or a redshirt sophomore, right? And Xavier Pone, who's a sophomore, and some of those defensive linemen they're bringing in have been, in the strength and conditioning program for a couple of years now. On the outside, you have a Heiberger and a Lafayette and a Posa. And you can start seeing those pieces mix in, and it feels like there's more talent that's coming there. So I think that's where I'm at on talent versus scheme. I think they obviously both matter. They obviously have to both get better. I think the talent in the front seven is a bigger issue right now. I truly, truly do. Feel free to disagree. As always, 100% feel free to disagree. That's what the show is all about. In fact, we're going to jump into our comments right now. Bunch of comments here. I put a comment up. What are you more confident in right now, football or basketball? Nalaju says option C, neither. Oh, it is kind of a tough time to be a Badger fan. I would say it's basketball for me. I didn't give you an option C, Nalaju. I mispronounced that name, I'm sure, but I think it's basketball. I like the mix they have. I think this team's going to shoot pretty well. Defensively, there's still questions for sure. Thomas Miller says, I think as Crowell goes, the Badgers go. He is probably the most important player on the team. I think most important is a good way to put it. It's probably Blackwell to me. I think Blackwell, because I don't know. It's Blackwell or Crowell. Crowell is vitally important to this team, and he has to show up. He doesn't have to be the best player on the team, but he has to be pretty consistent. And I definitely agree with Thomas on that one. Good friend of the show. Blackwell's just the best player, and in some ways, in basketball specifically, the best player is maybe equivalent to the quarterback. You just can't lose your best guy. And in that sense, I think Blackwell is probably the MVP, which is most valuable player on the team, would be my guess. But yeah, Crowell's right there with him. R Dubs says, Tanjay looked great out there at small forward. I thought his and Amos roles would be flipped in terms of who was starting off the bench. Also, Winter, 15 points on 6-6 shooting. Looked like he's locked in. Winter looked good. I think defensively there's still issues with playing both of them together, but Winter looked good. One of those, I will point out, on one of Winter's shots was an ugly brick that went in, but even then, that would make him 5 of 6 shooting for 12 points, which is obviously elite efficiency there as well. Tanjay did a lot of what I thought he would do, but he also added a little more, right? I thought Tanjay would be a guy who would hit open shots and would drive closeouts and get to the free throw line because of that. But the energy was awesome. Fighting on the boards, playing defensively, getting loose balls, being scrappy. That was a great part of what John Tanjay did. And if he brings that every week, like he is your third best player on the team, maybe third or fourth best player on the team, and a pretty good piece to get credit so far. One game in, 40 minutes into the season, but he looks like the type of player that I thought he would be. I didn't see who wrote this comment, but still people out there saying it's not Paul Chryst's fault. Who was the head coach and staff that led to an FCS guy playing 40, 50 snaps on the defensive line? Who was on the staff when UW recruited the current tight end depth? What about tailback depth? I won't even get it into the quarterback room that has 2 ex-quarterbacks struggling at Utah Tech and Albany. Speaking of Burkhead and Deacon Jones. So Mike is pointing out that a lot of these roster issues, in his opinion, do fall on Paul Chryst. And again, I'll go right back to the talent versus scheme thing. I'll say this. I'm not in a position anymore where I'm blaming things on Paul Chryst. This is Luke Fickell's job. He's the captain of the ship. It all falls on him. But he did inherit a roster that had more issues than I think any of us acknowledged. And it's taking time to fix those issues. I don't think they've been perfect in the transfer portal. That's on Fickell and company. It's also hard to rebuild the defensive line depth and front seven depth in a year and a half. So I think, again, there's a combination of both here. Mike is bringing up some pretty good points. This is from Winning Gambler. Klesman struggled from 3 in the scrimmage and was way out for 3 again. Could be in for a rough 3-point year. Amos struggling to find a way to help. Team is very meh. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you want to look at the positive side of it, Winning Gambler, Amos not all, maybe having some of the other depth is important. Maybe Amos isn't needed quite as much when you see some of the other guys step up a little bit more. Winter, Janicki maybe being a bit of a surprise guy. Klesman, I'm not worried about. Klesman's going to be a streaky shooter. He was that last year. He's going to be that this year. I want him to continue shooting, shoot on volume. That's what he has to do. And there's going to be games where he goes 1 of 7 like he did yesterday. And there's going to be games where he goes 5 of 6 because we saw that last year too. So I'm not stressed about Klesman. I do, and I'm with you on this one though. I was expecting more from Xavier Amos, and I do think it hurts that he's maybe not where we had hoped because he would give you some of that athleticism in the front court that I think this team desperately needs. I'm going to tell you why I think Gard started the right lineup. That's next after a quick word from our friends of the show over at ZBiotics. ZBiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel great the next day. If you're not sure how it works, here's what you got to do. Step 1, drink your pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Be normal, be cool, be chill, be yourself. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. Get 15% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode also brought to you by our incredible friends over at Game Time. They are the best place to get tickets. Pictures of the seats before you sit down, so you get the panoramic. It's not just the picture with the horse blinders on, right, where you could only see right in front of you. With this, you get panoramic views. You can see what's to the right, to the left, popcorn stand, beer place. It's all there. Like Game Time's got you hooked up, man. Best seats in the house. Go do more stuff in life. Game Time unlocks at sports, concerts, whatever it is, movie events. You can get everything over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snake the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. All right. Here's my thoughts on Gard and the starting lineup, because I've had several people already reach out or comment about we got to switch this up. They want Kamari McGee in the starting lineup. They don't like the 2-guard lineup with Blackwell and Klesman. I think people look at the slow. Here's where I think people are missing. People look at the slow start and equate that to wrong starting lineup. I just don't think they shot well. I think it's as simple as that. They got a lot of open threes and they just didn't hit them. That's what this team's going to be. They're going to take a lot of shots, and because of that, they're going to go cold at times, and it's going to look ugly. If that starting lineup had come out and they had shot 30%, you don't get that ugly start, and I'm not sure if people are having this conversation. Now, defensively, they came out kind of lackadaisical, but I just felt like the whole team did, and I don't think it's a starting lineup thing. I think that's your best lineup. I'm totally good with Gard rolling with that, and then you just bring in Kamari McGee and mix and match, and Kamari McGee's still going to play 20-something minutes. So I think you start with your best 5. I think the best 5 is what Gard rolled out with, and you just shoot better, and it's not a big deal. You also have the versatility at times to bring Kamari McGee in. You can mix and match them. I like that idea, right? If one of the guards is struggling a little bit, you can put McGee in for Klesman. You can put McGee in for Blackwell. And I think it gives you a little more versatility, and McGee gives you a little spark off the bench. He's the type of guy that, he comes in and he can change pace a little bit. He can go on to maybe if somebody's giving you issues with their driving kick ability, you can put McGee on him. I think it gives you a weapon off the bench, and I like the idea of putting your starting 5, your best 5 out there to match up. So I think it's the right lineup. I understand why some people don't love it because it does not have a traditional point guard, but I think it's the right one. Let's make some more comments out of here. A. Hill says, where the hell is Dan Freitag tonight? It's a 9-man rotation. He's just not in it. It's not deeper than that. He's a freshman. He's learning. He's working to get better, but he's not quite there yet. Dean Storn says, we're 1-0, and we love talking about closeouts. Yeah, I'll talk about closeouts all day, baby. Let's go. That's some coach stuff there. Curtis says, Paul Chryst is Wisconsin's Bo Pelini. 8 to 10 wins ain't good enough. Should have kept Chryst. Chryst might be Wisconsin's Frank Solich. No, Chryst wasn't Frank Solich. The Bo Pelini Chryst thing's interesting because here's the thing with Pelini. Pelini wasn't fired because of his winning percentage. He was fired. Well, there were multiple things, right? Pelini was a little rough around the edges with Nebraska. Like, he didn't always treat the fans and the media quite the way they wanted to. But he was fired a lot because of his performance in big games, the way he was getting blasted. Chryst had some of those moments too, right? Some Ohio State games. And so there, in that sense, maybe there is some similarities there. But again, like, people keep going back to Paul Chryst. I think there's some revisionist history with Paul Chryst. I think people forget some of the frustrations and the issues that we were dealing with at that time. I think it was the right move to move on from Paul Chryst. I've said that repeatedly. Time will tell if it was also the right move to then hire Luke Fickell. The jury's out on that one. But I think moving on from Paul Chryst was the correct answer. Bobby Light says, I'm an Iowa fan, shocked at seeing how Wisconsin has lost their identity. The defense is slow, not physical in the trenches. Yeah, hard to argue after that game, man. James M says, I'm tired of hearing the defense is improving. No pressure on the quarterback. Defensive backs are lost. What happened to linebacker U? I addressed some of this earlier, where I think it's more of a talent thing. I think linebacker U, the young guys are coming, but it's not as good now as it used to be. And I will point out, we're very good at swinging from pendulums, like one side to the other really quickly. The Iowa game was a disaster. It was a train wreck. But before that, you had 3 games against bad teams where the defense gave up 16-ish points, and then they held Penn State to 21. Like, the defense had played better. Statistically, eye test, whatever you want to call it, it's still not great. It's still not getting pressure on the quarterback, but the defense had gotten better. And then obviously Iowa happened, and they got gashed. James H says a Jim Leonard defense never would have surrendered 42. Again, yes, I agree. I think even with lesser talent, Leonard would have adjusted quicker and had a better game plan. But Jim Leonard defenses also, as I mentioned earlier, had a lot more NFL talent. GT Mueller said, never get too high or too low. No quarterback, no team. Listen, I've said that before. I think GT's onto something. Ultimately, they got to figure out quarterback. You figure out quarterback, a lot of the other pieces fall into place. You don't figure out quarterback, nothing's going to get better. I agree with that one. I love this comment from an Iowa fan who just feels sorry for us. Like, that's also the state of where we're at now. I have Iowa fans like coming over and giving me virtual hugs. Iowa fan says, you guys can do it. The season isn't over yet. Win what you can and get to a bowl game. Thank you. Thanks, Iowa fan. Like, doggone it, man. It tells you how far we've fallen on this one. Wayne M says, you can run the ball. You can win running the friggin' ball. Look at Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. Let's get over this air raid BS and get back to Big Ten football. The social experiment needs to end. Like, I'll push back on that one a little bit from Wayne. Like, Phil Longo wants to run the ball. They're not trying to not run the ball. They're just not. It's just not an offense that's being run well. It's not an offense that has a good quarterback right now. And because of those two things, it makes the air raid look bad. The air raid can be successful if you have the right quarterback and you're running it well. It's like any offense. There were moments when the pro style looks like trash too. Like, you need a good quarterback and you need to run the offense. You need to run it well. And if you don't do those things, yeah, it's going to look terrible. I don't think it's indicative of the offense being, like, not being able to run that type of offense here. I think it's the way it's being executed, the talent, and the quarterback. I think those are the reasons it's not working. It's not because the air raid is inherently flawed or can't be used. Let's see. Con27277 says, hope you learned not to be trashing other teams in the offseason when Wisconsin is this bad. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I haven't learned that lesson. Like, I don't even know which team he's referring to that I was trashing in the offseason, but I guarantee I'm probably going to be trashing some more this offseason. So, listen, I don't live in a glass house. I'll take those rocks back. But, yeah, I'm not done trashing other teams. Let's be super clear on that one. Alan S., force Iowa to pass, put 10 people on scrimmage. I hear you 100%. I don't know what that defensive game plan was. They threw the ball 10 times and scored 42. Bro, like, put both safeties 8 yards off the line of scrimmage and play a 4-4. I don't care. I'm sorry. Like, I 100% agree with you there, man. Okay, let's keep going here. Tyler Strieber, good friend of the show, was at the game. Was 10th row on the 50 at Hawkeye sideline. From what I saw, Iowa old school Wisconsin ran the ball down our throats. Offense went 3 and out too often. Even Bertram's punt sucked. He went on to say it was embarrassing. I'm sorry you were there for that, Tyler. Tyler's a good dude. Yeah, he said it right. Like, they beat us up like Wisconsin used to beat up other teams. It was embarrassing. It was not good. All right, we're going to wrap it there on Wisconsin. Appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody listening. You guys are incredible. Go check out Locked On Big Ten when you're done here. All the biggest conference stories on the Big Ten, Locked On Big Ten channel network. Go check them out on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.